The fight for a $15 minimum wage goes back years in several U.S. cities, New York, Seattle, San Francisco, just to name a few. But it's only recently gained enough momentum in Canada to become policy. First in Alberta, where that bump takes effect next year. And then, as we heard today, Ontario's plan is for the year after that. We want to talk more now about the impact all those planned labor changes could have on workers and businesses. Armin Yalnizyan is a public economist. Carl Baldoff is with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, both here to talk about it. So, Armin, let me start with you. What especially do you like about what you heard today, assuming you like it?
Oh, I think it's a long overdue suite of packages that actually bring back respect for workers' abilities as well as time. And I think it'll build the economy from the bottom up, which is something we've been waiting for a long time. I think it's actually an inclusive growth strategy. So I'm loving it.
Okay, so build the economy is not what you often hear from businesses in reaction to an increase in the minimum wage, Carl. Is there something about this you don't like in particular?
Well, we all deserve evidence-based reform, and our message to the government of Ontario is, of course, we all want to share in prosperity, but if you're going to proceed with such dramatic changes, we need to do so in a way that is evidence-based. And so although this review has taken 2 years, at no point have they conducted a cost-benefit analysis to fully understand what will be the impact of these changes on the economy broadly. And we're a bit concerned that there will be broadly negative changes as a result of the reforms announced today.
Such as?
Well, a number of businesses have indicated to us that they're going to have to increase prices on everyday goods to consumers. Other businesses have said they're going to have to scale back on the number of workers that they have. And still other businesses, especially small businesses, have said that they're going to have to close up shop completely because after a number of new costs, such as the CPP enhancement, such as cap and trade, such as rising electricity prices, they're at the end and they cannot take any more new costs.
Okay, so Armin, job losses, businesses moving, businesses shutting down. What's the counter to that?
Well, definitely there will be job losses. Definitely businesses will have to shut down. There's always businesses operating at the margin where any little thing will tip them over. But what will happen is that the people that are getting paid are going to actually be able to spend more money. And that is going to actually increase business for some businesses. It's going to build the economy from the bottom up because it's not businesses that create jobs, it's customers. And when customers have more money to spend, they are able to, especially minimum wage workers are able to spend more money in the economy because they're not being squeezed with housing costs. There's more disposable income to spend.
On the point of evidence-based reform, it was the Premier's own advisory panel on minimum wages 3 years ago that said for every 10% increase in minimum wage, youth unemployment, it goes up 6%. So this is the real challenge that we have right now. There are a lot of unintended consequences, and the government has not done the proper work to fully understand what that will mean. And that also means that they haven't prepared for the offsets that will be needed to help businesses transition into this new reality.
I don't think we need any offsets for what's about to happen because the new reality is not a 20th century reality. It's a 21st century reality where our young people are working and not seeing any increases. So this $15 an hour minimum wage is not a working wage, as our banner tells us. It's a living wage. It helps people actually do more in life than just work to scramble to try and make ends meet. And I think the idea that businesses have to be offset for everything that happens, I don't understand why it is that workers don't need to be offset for every time a Tim Hortons decides to raise the price of coffee without raising the price of wages.
I mean, doesn't it speak to a business model that may not be working if you are, as Armin said, sort of right on the margins, that this is the thing that tips the scale and shuts your business down, that maybe your business cannot operate in this economy?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges that we're looking at right now, and chief among them is the impending renegotiation of NAFTA. So an economy like Ontario is extremely exposed already. So you have that on the one hand. On the other hand, you have new costs. And so there are so many vulnerabilities that exist in our society. We are encouraging as a business community to say, of course, a third week of vacation, that's not going to kill us. But all of these changes happening without a foundation of a good knowledge about what the economic impact will be, that's frankly irresponsible. We deserve evidence-based decision-making.
What is irresponsible, in my view, Diana, is that we haven't had the changes that should have been happening over the last 20 or 30 years. The Premier herself said we haven't done a proper review of labor laws for over 2 decades. And so consequently, some of the changes that should have been happening incrementally to keep pace with things like the new normal of being temporary jobs for young people and no control over your working hours and sometimes your working conditions, and more bosses actually violating laws, knowing that they can get away with it because they're not enforced.
But to
These
take your
should have been
point-
happening before.
So then is this too much too fast?
Well, I guess there's plenty of opportunity for us to debate all of that because there will be an election coming up fairly shortly. So if you don't like it, it'll be interesting to see what other parties actually offer as well. But I think the bigger story here is, what are we going to do to catch up to 21st century realities? If you just keep saying no to changes that actually help workers, you're not improving the economy.
You know, one of the pieces that was announced today was the call for more enforcement. And broadly, I think the employer community, more than anyone, acknowledges that bad apple employers actually make life more difficult for those employers that follow the rules.
Yeah.
And so we don't have any issue with that. But what we do have an issue with is the lack of education. So I far too often will chat with small businesses in small towns who employ themselves, their spouse, and their neighbor, and they want to do right. But the education is so convoluted for these individuals who have taken it upon themselves to become entrepreneurs. They don't understand what their obligations are. So increasing enforcement is one thing, but what also has to happen is increase education of regulations that exist.
I couldn't agree more, actually, with this, because what we have noticed in the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, where I used to work, and living wage campaigns, is when you talk to employers about what a living wage can mean for their workers and for the local economy, they're on board. So I think you're right that there's a few bad apples that do need to be pinned in, because you want to discourage bad behavior. You don't want to keep turning a blind eye to it.
Yeah.
But it's also a process of actually improving everybody's economy.
But does this, even the headline coverage of this today, discourage businesses from hiring, make them look at their numbers and go, well, we're just going to stick with the numbers we have here
I
in
can
terms
answer
of
that. The
employees?
answer is absolutely yes. Well, we're looking at across the province. Companies are saying to us they cannot make it work anymore. There was an example during this review of two major franchises, one from the United States, one from Alberta, came to us and said, we're thinking about opening up in Ontario, but we're not going to do so until this review concludes because we're concerned about what the new costs will be. That's the reality in Ontario right now. We're seeing challenges that exist with no commitment by government to tackle them. It's going to lead to increased job losses.
But who do you give priority to in that circumstance? To the business or to the workers?
I actually think there's a win-win solution here by raising wages, because you don't want to have an economy in the 21st century that is based on low wages. You want to have an economy that's based on productivity enhancements. If they let go of some workers, that means they will become more productive. The ones that actually disappear may be so marginal that that's not a net loss for the economy if other companies become stronger, create better jobs with more skills. And in fact, what you're doing is, for the masses of workers that do function at less than $15 an hour, which, by the way, is 30% of our economy, we've been driving the economy on a low wage basis for far too long. We want more productivity, and if raising wages does it, that will actually be good for everybody.
Got about 30 seconds left, so why don't you take us to the end?
I think it's important to remember, too, that we're not just talking about businesses. One of the largest employers of part-time and contract workers in this province is the province of Ontario. So there's been no discussion about what these impacts will have on the provincial treasury. And as taxpayers, once again, in the notion of evidence-based reform, we need to understand what it will cost us.
Carl, Armin, thanks so much for this.
Thank you.